First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji, host of Tier Talk. Great video sent my way from Elias Husamudeen. Thank you for sending me this video. Right now, guys, there are laws that are coming into play, or laws that are being altered, if you will, that affect the safety and security of our brave men and women that work behind the wall. And Elias Husamudeen, who's the president of COBA, which is the union that represents those brave men and women that work in Rikers, he's not going to sit by and let those laws change to the point where it affects our safety and well-being. Guys, check out this video. Elias, great job. You brought them to school. Stand by.
Next to testify would be Mr. Elias Husamudeen, the president of COBA, and I thank him for his flexibility in the scheduling concerning testimony.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Before I read my testimony, I'd like to say, basically, Senator Bailey, I understand what you said as far as not having a problem with people knowing where you live and wanting people to know where you live. I do believe that your attitude would be quite different if you were a correction officer. It would be quite different.
Well, Mr. I just want to clarify, since you brought that back up, I want to clarify what I meant. I meant that in terms of transparency. I did not mean that in terms of like your specific job duties. I am not a member of law enforcement. I've never been one. I'm not trained, and I don't do what you do. I've made that abundantly clear, and I have nothing but respect. I want to be very clear about what I meant by that statement.
No, I got you. Because I got you, and I just have to say, because we're dealing, as New York City correction officers, a little different than the NYPD and maybe some of the other law enforcement agencies. Our situation is a little different. It's a little bit more unique than a lot of the other law enforcement, where the NYPD might be responsible for going after gangs, going after gang members, and then we see the press conference where they have 30 gang members that they're bringing out of the precinct. And those 30 gang members are going to a jail where I work. And they're going to this jail because they're being accused of conspiracy to commit murder, and a lot of different things that they do to the people around them. So I just think that it's important that we maintain a balance in what it is that we're doing. And to respond to the public advocate as far as the unions or the people behind him being transparent, I think that there's the COBA, the Correction Officers Union, has been probably the most transparent union in this city when it comes to issues of law enforcement. I think we're probably more transparent than the Office of the Public Advocate as to why we want what we want, and what we want is simple: to be safe. So on that note, I'll read my testimony and then I'll entertain questions. Good afternoon, Chairman Bailey and members of the committee. My name is Elias Husamudeen, and I'm the president of the Correction Officers Benevolent Association, COBA, the second largest law enforcement union in the city of New York. My members, also known as New York City Boulders, oversee the second largest municipal jail system in the United States. I thank you for inviting me to come before you and to share with you the grave concerns we have concerning the potential changes or proposed repeal of Section 50A. In 1981, an amendment was made to Section 50, adding local correction officers to the protected class of law enforcement officers, which highlighted the fact that statutory protection should be expanded because of the increasing number of legal actions brought by inmates and ex-inmates of correctional facilities, which had been accompanied by an increase in the number of requests from attorneys representing them for unlimited access to personnel records of correction officers. Correction officers are concerned that such unrestricted examination of their personnel records increase their vulnerability to harassment or reprisals. To help alleviate this concern and to promote better relations between correction officers and their governmental employees, this legislation imposed reasonable limitation on access to personnel records in the custody of the Sheriff's Office or the County Department of Corrections. Additionally, the amendment declared that the described abuses of personnel information, which the amendment was designed to prevent, included harassment or reprisals against an officer or his or her family. Currently, correction officers facing disciplinary hearings have their cases adjudicated by the Office of Trials and Hearings, which better known as OATH, and the rulings and recommendation of OATH judges concerning correction officers' disciplinary matters are made public. A couple of years ago, COBA attorneys filed a lawsuit in state Supreme Court arguing that 50A of New York State civil rights law, which make law enforcement records confidential, should be extended to records about correction officers that are now published by the city administrative court, better known as OATH. Today's increased social media climate, coupled with the rise in gang activity in our jails, necessitate taking this action to protect our officers, their families, and their loved ones from potential retaliatory action. Our position in this debate over the potential repeal of 50A is somewhat unique. Not only are we calling for the personnel records of law enforcement officers to remain private, we're also calling for added protection for our members to prohibit OATH from publishing the disciplinary reports and recommendations made by administrative law judges concerning our members. In short, correction officers should have the same protection as police officers concerning the privacy of our personnel records. Our members are exposed to dangerous gangs every day. Gangs that communicate from jail to other gang members on the street. Increasing the accessibility of our members' personnel records not only jeopardizes the safety of our members, it also jeopardizes the safety of their families, which was raised as a legitimate concern dating as far back as 1981. Sadly, our culture today is consumed with punishing and demonizing law enforcement officers, including correction officers. Criminal justice activists have made us all the enemy. The reality is we are the last line of defense between public safety and lawlessness. The very fact that the legislators even considering this misguided measure that serves only to appeal to the criminal justice activists at the expense of our lives and the lives of our family is indeed disheartening. Perhaps whenever an inmate who served time or was accused of a violent crime re-enters our community, the state of New York should post an online data detailing the extensive rap sheet of that individual so neighborhood schools and after-school programs could be made aware of the potential threat. We do that now for sexual predators, but we don't do it for all criminals. In closing, on behalf of my 10,000 members who put their lives on the line every day on behalf of the city and on behalf of their families, I strongly urge you not to repeal 50A and in fact expand its protections to better protect my members from the clear and present danger that they face on and off the job. It's about safety and security. That's the bottom line. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I want to thank you for your testimony, and just like I mentioned to everybody else, I want to thank you for the work that you do in keeping. It's a tough job. It's a job that, again, I'm not trained to do, that I don't believe that I could do. So I thank you for doing it. And to some clarity on the address matter, 50A wouldn't allow the addresses to be made public anyway. Maybe we're arguing a moot point because I brought the addresses in there, but right. I don't want your addresses to be made public, just like I don't want anybody else's addresses to be made public. So I just wanted to clarify that, what that does and what that doesn't do.
Thank you, bro.
And I guess the question that I would have for you is that since you mentioned that not only you're not in favor of repeal, you want added protections, would you be open to any modification of 50A whatsoever?
Here's the reality. I sat through part of the testimony before me. I think that what I would like for you and your colleagues to understand is this. And especially speaking for correction officers, my members, we always feel as if everything that the lawmakers are interested, especially lately, in doing is totally against us. That's how my members feel. Like most of the laws that are looking to be repealed and all these other type of things are things regardless of whether there are things in there that protect us or not. We want to repeal it. I mean, we want to talk about you know, the people say black and brown, people of color, whatever it is. 65% of my members are people of color. 65% of my members, of my 10,000 members, are people of color. And I'm sorry, 85% of my members are people of color. 65% of us live in the city, in the 5 boroughs. And, you know, without being redundant, whatever laws you're looking to change, appeal, do over, all we're asking is that you consider us, our safety, our security, just as much as you consider the issues and concern of the advocates who come here and sit here and for the most part, are one-sided, very one-sided, very lopsided. And that's our interest, brother. We're just concerned at being at the table and having a fair say in what it is that's being determined or discussed that's going to affect our lives.
I certainly appreciate that sentiment, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to convene this hearing, because I legitimately want to hear from people. But again, as I've said in other, and I sound like a broken record, I don't mean it in a demeaning fashion, but like the reason why we're doing this is because everybody, people on either side, whatever it is, they've been recalcitrant to hear what the other side has been saying. We're in the same room. You got to hear what people are saying.
Absolutely.
Echo chambers are echo chambers. I'm a Met fan. I think the Mets are the greatest team in the world, right? Yeah.
Well, me and you in the same boat.
So,
I'm a Knicks
see?
fan.
Me too, right?
You know, you're a Met fan. I'm a Knicks fan.
Yeah. So, but look, but we're in that Knicks fan bubble,
Right.
And everybody else on social media is hashtag LOL Knicks, right? Everybody is laughing at the New York Knicks, and we're still standing with them.
Yeah.
I use that as a moment of levity to understand that we have to consider each other's thoughts, and we have to have conversations like this, and they may get contentious. And they are difficult to have because they are dissenting in differing worldviews. We do different things for a living.
Right.
We live in different places. So obviously where we live, where we work, who we see, what we do is going to shape that worldview. But things like this and forums like this are very important for me. And to a person, I believe for all of my colleagues here, to understand exactly what it is that you're facing. And we legitimately want to hear you out. Not saying we're going to agree, but we want to hear you out. So that point, certainly, sir, has been heard loud and clear with you for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions? Senator Rivera. We've been joined by Assemblymember New, so we're going to go to Senator Rivera briefly.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Your members work in Rikers Island?
Rikers Island and the borough facilities.
And the
Or
borough-
what used to be Rikers Island. I think today they're voting to close it. So what
Right.
used to be
The
Rikers
place,
Island.
Rikers Island and the borough
Yeah.
facility.
Yes, sir.
And the folks that you watch over are folks that have been arrested, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 70% of them are just been accused of a crime.
85% of them.
85% have been accused of a crime,
Right.
but do you believe that people are innocent until proven guilty?
Sure.
Okay, so if 85% of the folks, because the reason I'm asking this is just to establish it for the record, because I certainly don't want anyone that does any job to be in danger, but it seems that as you were talking about the situation of you and your members, it kind of felt like you were speaking as if you go into enemy territory every time that you go into one of these facilities. And if I'm just trying, what I'm trying to figure out is if most of the individuals, and I'll finish in a second to allow you to respond. So if most of the individuals there are being accused of a crime, and but they have not been found guilty, at least not yet, right? Then why did I get the wrong impression from what you were saying? You were describing the situation of your membership as if though they go into an enemy territory every day.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, enemy territory, because basically, as a correctional officer, I'm walking into an area where there are 50 people who don't want to be there. I'm walking into an area where there are 50 people who are there for various who have been accused of various type of crimes, be it robbery, be it felony assault, be it assault in the first degree, be it non-payment of child support. At the end of the day, the environment that I work in is not kindergarten, it's not college, it's jail. And jail is not a happy place. It never has been, and it never will be. So when I'm going in, I am actually being responsible for 50 people who don't want to be responsible for, who don't want to be there. So is it hostile? Is it enemy? Yeah, at times it is.
Okay.
Is it all the time? No. But at the end of the day, I think that it's important for you and your colleagues to understand. Here's the reality. The 12 people who killed Guzman Jr., all of you back there want them in jail. And they're all innocent until proven guilty. Although we watched the video and we saw what they did, you still want them in jail. They either don't have a bail, or they either have a bail and can't make the bail, or they're remanded. But the reality is, you and every New Yorker who watched that want these 12 people in jail.
And I would also argue.
These 12 people who've been locked up for that particular crime come to jail where I work, and they continue to commit the same type of crimes that they've been accused of. So again, I'm just trying to get back to you as far as when you say a hostile environment,
to respond.
That's what I work in.
That happened in my district. To respond to that, certainly, I believe that anyone that commits a crime should be held accountable.
Although they're innocent until proven guilty.
Certainly. But two things. First, I would argue that there is a level of failure that we as a society have to acknowledge. These individuals did not commit the crime in a vacuum. Certainly they should be held accountable for their crimes. The argument that we are making consistently is that so should officers be held accountable for their crimes.
I think you're going somewhere else where you started. Wait.
I'm not done, sir.
I think you're going somewhere else from where you started. I'm not debating or arguing with you, Rivera, as far as what they should be held accountable for. All I'm saying to you is I'm responding to what you said as far as the environment that correction officer Elias Husamudeen works in. That's all I'm saying. It's not the job of the correction officer to decide guilt. That's not our job.
Okay, so since
we're there for care, custody, and control.
My time will be limited, so I just want to make sure that I'm the questions were asked in the sense of trying to figure out exactly how you view your responsibility as a corrections officer. And I was going to go down that road.
Okay.
You turned in a different direction when you talked about these individuals that committed this crime.
Well, so I just used them as an example so that you understand who we're working with.
If I may, I understand. But what I'm trying to tell you, number one, as I said, I believe that everyone should be held accountable for their crimes. I believe that even these individuals who committed this crime, if they get to the point where they accept and acknowledge the crime that they've committed, and through the time in the correction system actually become better people, that they eventually should be let out. I believe that.
Okay.
And I also believe that there's a level of responsibility that we as a society have to these young people who found that they had no other choice except to join this gang. And then I'm not taking away responsibility from them as individuals, but to acknowledge that we as a society also, and me personally, as somebody who works in government, has a responsibility to make sure that we create a condition where those individuals do not have that they have better choices. So that's number one.
Agreed.
Number two, on the issue of the individuals, the majority, 85% you said of the folks that are there are accused of a crime. And the overwhelming majority of them are not accused of the crimes that these 12 people were accused of. So it is the larger, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, the core of this whole conversation, is accountability. And you believe, and you've stated on the record, that you do not believe that changing any part of it, that if we're going to change 50A, that we should increase the amount of protections that exist, as you call them, as opposed to either getting rid of it completely or changing parts of it so that there's more transparency and there could be more accountability for individuals who have histories of misconduct as either police officers or corrections officers. That is what you have stated on the record. You do not believe that we need to change it to provide the level of accountability that we believe they need to have.
And I'm here to add that if you're going to change it, as I said before I started reading it, if you're going to change it, then it should be clear that my members, correction officers, are considered our safety, our security, the safety of the environment that we work in should be considered if it's going to be changed, or if there's going to be no, I'm not looking for a total repeal of this thing, but if you're going to change it, don't sit here and just change it without taking correction officers and what we do for a living into consideration as city workers or as workers for our government.
And we will do so during this process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Murdoch.
Thank you, Senator Rivera. Senator Hoylman.
Yes. Good afternoon. It struck me that you said that the cause to repeal 50A is primarily being generated by criminal justice advocates. That's what you said in your testimony. I just wanted to point out, sir, that there is a widespread coalition here and elsewhere throughout the city and state that supports the repeal of 50A, including organized labor, good government groups like Citizens Union and the Committee on Open Government, legal service providers like Brooklyn Defenders, New York County Defenders, Legal Aid Society, Bronx Defenders, legal experts from the New York City Bar that have issued a memo in support, newspaper publishers as represented by the New York News Publishers Association, LGBT groups and women's groups who are here today, the Transgender Law Center and Girls for Gender Equity, civil liberties groups like the New York Civil Liberties Union. So I think what I'd like just to impress upon you, sir, is that this issue is more than just about the jobs of your members. It goes to the essence of our democracy and living in an open society, and the need to have public officers, no matter where they serve, accountable to the public. So I would urge you to broaden your perspective and think about today as we live in a nation where people of privilege who hold high government offices say they're above the law, that we can't stand for that, and we as public officials all have to be subject to it.
Senator, let me say this to you. I don't need to broaden my perspective. I clearly understand what I said and what I meant. As far as you and anyone else sitting around and making decisions about the job that I do, of course, as lawmakers, you have that right. All I am asking is that if you're going to make rules and make laws concerning the job that I do, because you need to understand that every day that I put on my uniform, that I risk my life. That's not every job. Every job that everyone does doesn't have those type of dire consequences. The other thing is, you're talking to someone who understands this completely. I am one of seven. I have 5 brothers who've been on and off Rikers Island for the last 20 years. I have a sister who just came home from doing 5.5 for attempted murder. I have a sister who's a correction officer. I have a son who's a correction officer. I have a nephew who's a correction officer. So you're not talking to someone who don't understand this from both sides. Because at the end of the day, I don't want my mother to get a call for the ones on this side or on that side. So my perspective, I don't think it gets any broader. My perspective doesn't get any broader. And all the people that you name who are interested in repealing this particular law, again, I'm saying to you, I understand what I said in my testimony, but I also understand what I said in the beginning. If you're going to repeal, if you're going to do anything with this, then you make sure that you do it with the thought of New York City correction officers in mind, because it's very important. We put our lives on the line every day, and I will not allow anybody to marginalize what we do as if what we do is something that everybody does every day. It's not.
And that's, I think, why the chair has you here and why we're eager to hear your testimony.
I'm simply responding to you saying that I have to broaden my horizon. I just want you to understand
I was only trying
who's
to correct,
sitting before
I was only
you.
trying to correct your statement that this is the interest in this is only around as you put it, criminal justice advocates. I would argue
I didn't say
that it's
criminal
much
justice. I said advocates, which I would assume would have covered everybody that you named. I
then-
never said criminal justice advocate.
Okay, well,
I said
I wrote it down as
advocates.
such. But nevertheless, then I am glad we agree, sir. Appreciate your service,
Yes.
and look forward to hearing more from you as my colleagues continue to ask you questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harmon. Senator Myrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Elias, for your testimony today, and thank you for your service. And thank you to your members for their service as well. I want to focus on one thing you said in your testimony, and you said we should consider, when people are released, to have their information and their past histories made public so that the neighborhoods that they're returning to should be made aware. Now, is it your position that someone who has committed a crime in the past is more likely to commit that crime in the future?
No. First of all, happy birthday. The reason I said that was to make a point. Here's the point. If we're talking about repealing 50A, if we're talking about making correction officers personnel records and making correction officers history of whether it's a use of force, good or bad, making that available, we're talking about doing that what? To protect the public, to protect inmates, to protect the people. So I simply put that in there to say if we're that concerned about the public, about the people, then the guy that just came home for rape, attempted murder, assault, let's make his information just as available. That's the reason I put it in there. That's the reason. I'm saying let's be fair across the board. Let's just not look at correction officers, police officers, and others and act as if we're some type of, like we're over here by ourselves. That's the reason I put that in there. Let's just be fair. I mean, when my brother come home, if he come home because he's did time for robbery, then let's let the whole neighborhood know that he did time for robbery. You're going to let the whole neighborhood know that I'm a correction officer and I had a bad day, I had a bad use of force, so I did something wrong. You're going to let the neighborhood know. Let's let the neighborhood know about everybody. Let's let the village know everybody that's in the village. That's the reason I put that in there.
So here's why I ask. And I brought this up with the SBA earlier. If a victim of an illegal assault or some crime perpetrated against them is unable to get the history of this public official, someone who is paid for by the taxpayer dollar, what then prevents this person from perpetrating that misconduct going forward? Let me be more specific. Don't you think that someone who has been a victim of an assault by a CO, and I'm going to put it out there and say that the overwhelming majority of our correction officers are in a hostile environment. It is different in kind, I think, than what our PD faces because of the environment. But in the event that they have perpetrated an assault or something illegal against the victim, what rationale is there, if we're trying to determine the culpability, that person's guilt, what rationale is there for us not to know whether they have done this in the past?
I was here a little earlier when somebody was going back and forth with Lou Matarazzo. I'm like you, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been a correction officer for 31 years. And I do know that when a correction officer is accused of violating the use of force policy, or accused of using excessive force or unnecessary force, you as well as I do know that correction officers have been arrested. And that correction officer, just like everyone else who's arrested, is innocent until proven guilty. They go through the court process of their lawyer requesting this document, that document, and different things of that nature. I was under the impression that this is something that still happens in court. I was under the impression that the district attorney and they're still able to request people's prior records as far as whether they have prior bad use of force or good use of force. So I don't know where that right of the courts went. And at the end of the day, here's the reality. When that officer, that correction officer, gets his or her chance in court, and whoever it is that he or she's been accused of violating gets his or her chance in court, I'm honestly, Senator, I'm missing something as far as that whole process is concerned, because I do believe that they get the opportunity to know whether, well, I got to tell you, unlike anybody else, I know that the New York City Department of Corrections provide this information even when they're asked for it. But at the end of the day, I just thought that that was still a part of the process as far as our criminal justice system is concerned.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to discuss today, and this is the principle of the law, and I'll end on this because I've also had experiences where clients have been assaulted by correction officers, and we were not able to have access to the disciplinary history of that person because of 50A. And so what we're asking is for the transparency to adjudicate the process. We're not saying that you should not go through a trial and that you should not have a fair hearing, but if there has been a finding that there has been misconduct on behalf of the CO, then the person who has been allegedly assaulted by that person should have access to that record. It is not to put people on blast. It's not to make people more vulnerable. This is just like we always bring up victims in our criminal justice discussion. This is about someone who has had something perpetrated against them, trying to get to the root of what happened.
Help me out here. Help me out. You're saying that I, Correctional Officer Husamudeen, use excessive force on inmate Brown. What you want is what?
So if you used excessive force on Mr. Brown, and then you allegedly use excessive force on me, what I want to know, when we're going through the process, right, because I have accused you in a complaint, all that good stuff, we're going through the process. What I want to know is, have you assaulted people like me in the past? That's what this is about. So that we can figure out whether that you have a propensity to do this. It's not to put you on blast. It's not to embarrass you. It's not to say you don't sacrifice for the community. It's to say, I had something, an injustice done to me, and I just want to know if this person who was in this position of power has done it in the past.
And here's what the concern of a lot of law enforcement officers are, including correction officers, when we're talking about what you're saying. I, Correction Officer Husamudeen, I've been a correction officer 30 years. And in my 30 years, I've had, let's just say 10 use of force, maybe even more, especially depending on where I work in the jail. Most of our concern is, and I don't know how the lawmakers can help make this help correction officers. You know what most of our, and I'm just being straight genuine, you know what most of our concern is? Most of our concern is that you're going to take my record and totally, even if it's not fair, use that to destroy my career or to destroy my life. That's most of our concern. My question to you would be, how can you as lawmakers help us in a situation where here it's all available, and in my 30 years, out of my 10 use of forces, I've had 2 that were bad, but and not even in, for lack of a better, not even insanely bad, but bad, or outside of what the rules say. Now, I, as a correction officer, have to sit here and wonder whether or not although out of my 30 years, my 30 years has been shining, my 30 years have been exemplary, my 30 years have been good, now I am here and I'm going to be facing not just losing my job, but maybe even doing time on something that most times I had a split second to make a decision on. And I mean, brother, listen, y'all have to understand something. You guys are, I don't want to say you guys are never going to get it. There's certain parts of our job, our duty, and what we do that you're never going to get, because most of you have never been in a fight. Do you understand that we have like 3,000 fights? We have 1,000 fights a day that correction officers are involved in, and we're not, Senator, we're not asking for it. This is just something that every day happen, and we have to make these decisions, and then we have to be judged based on how many times we made the decision to use it or not to use it, or if we went over. If you're going to consider repealing, if you're going to consider making rules that's going to affect me and what I do, damn, can I be at the table? I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to yield to my colleagues, but I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
And just about that, without getting myself in trouble, I grew up in the Bronx, so like I'm
if I take a tally, it might be 3.
I grew up in the Bronx.
Because I grew up in Harlem, and maybe I had one fight. Most of the people who grew up in Harlem didn't have fights. It's like most of our inmates don't give us problems. It's like most correction officers do the right thing, but it's not the most that we're talking about. We're talking about the one.
And we have to legislate for the many instead of the few, because the few don't give us the problem. Because the many, they do the right thing.
Yes.
By and large, you do the right thing. But the few,
and
10% of the crime,
and here's the
90%
problem.
of crimes are committed by 10% of the people. The few.
And here's the problem. We don't want you painting with a broad brush. We don't want you trying to catch the few and putting your net out there and getting all of us when all of us don't belong in there. And that's some of our fear when it comes to dealing with lawmakers. I mean, look, I lived in Harlem most of my life. I was raised in Harlem. Have I been stopped by police officers? Hell yeah. I'm 59 years old. I'm the president of the Correctional Officers Union, and I still get pulled over. But at the end of the day, if you want to deal with the few, then let's figure out a way we could deal with the few without taking this brush and painting this picture as if we all are guilty of doing what the few may be guilty of.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that statement. I just think about an era, Patrick Dorismond, right? I think about how I know his name and how his records were released, and after he was killed, like I remember that growing up. I remember Anthony Baez. I Diallo.
Eleanor Bumpers. I mean, we could go through the list. We could do that all day.
Absolutely.
We could go through the list. But at the end of the day, if we're going to make laws, let's make laws that's really just. Because see, here's the reality. And I know, my guys will be like, listen, you're talking too much. Here's the reality for me. I'm a black man. And it used to be against the law for my people to know how to read. And it was legal. It was right. It was good. So I'm saying that to say the law ain't always right. But let's try to get it, since all of you guys are lawmakers. If you're going to make laws concerning correction officers, if you're going to make laws concerning law enforcement officers, let's try to get it right. Let's try to get it as right as we possibly can, so that 65%, do you know that 55% of my 11,000 correction officers are women, mothers, aunties, grandmothers? I just don't want my people to be painted with no broad brush. And we're not here trying to cover for someone who wants to break the law, whether they're a correction officer or not. Whether they're a correction officer or not. If you did wrong, then you should be subjected to whatever it is the law says you should be subjected to. We're not opposing that. We're not opposing that. But all we're saying is, with this 50A, if you're going to change it, let's put as much protection in there, or keep as much protection in there for correction officers and law enforcement officers as we can.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Benjamin.
I'm not going to get into how many fights I did or did not have. I will promise you it's more than 3, but my mom might see this, so I don't want to get into the specifics. But let me ask you a couple questions. I want to take a step back for a second. One, let's start off with this. How many of your officers of the 11,000 you would say have disciplinary records, percentage-wise?
Out of my 11,000, honestly, probably less than 1%. Maybe less than one. Believe it or not, it's not a lot.
It's small. I assumed you would say it's small.
I'm not just saying it's small. I mean, I'll get you the numbers and send it to you. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's
less than 1%.
It's small,
right? So the population that we're talking about here, in terms of when we talk about repealing 50A, it's the impact is really to less than 1% of your membership, right? In terms of the implications of that information being made available to the public. Is that correct, or you?
Well, here's the thing. It's still going to affect the other 99%.
Why?
Because we're going to be we're going to be subjected to whatever this rule is. I, as the good officer, who's not a part of the 1% or less than 1%, will still be judged the same way by the same rules. See, you have to, honestly, Senator, you have to understand the mindset that you're dealing with when you're talking to us. You have to understand the mindset. And the reality is that in the Department of Corrections, they come up with all of these different type of rules and directives and operational orders, and these things end up having a negative effect on a good officer, on an officer who did his or her 20 years and did everything that was right. But because we have this new rule, you have to do it's basically what I said earlier. It's this broad brush that ends up being painted.
So I'm sorry. So how much time I have, Senator Bailey? I don't want to over ask questions.
Senator Benjamin, we want to make sure that look, I'm just gonna let y'all know, like, you can stay here.
Okay, I got it.
But the air and the lights might not be here.
I got it. So no, because I think that let's go back to, because I want to go back to the 1%. So less than 1%, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert on 50A. I know less than 1% would actually be impacted by this repeal, if it was a full repeal, because less than 1% of your members actually have disciplinary records. I mean, that's what Senator Myrie was just talking about, the inability to get these records, but it would apply to less than 1% of your 11,000. I mean, am I just want to make sure I'm getting that right? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I told you less than 1%,
okay,
but go ahead, keep going with the 1%.
So therefore, your response is that the other 99% is impacted because just the fact that the less than 1% information is made available to the public, the other 99% is painted with the brush of the less than 1%?
See, here we go again, right?
That's a question. That was not a statement. Okay.
Here we go again. I'm still trying to figure out why, when a correction officer, a police officer, whoever is arrested for using excessive force or whatever it is, why the other people at the other table cannot ascertain his or her records. I'm just finding that I'm just not understanding that at all.
So your
again,
question,
I can't speak for the other agencies or the other unions, but I have to say for mine, I know dealing with oath, the Office of Trials and Hearing, I know that our records are made available. I know they are. And what we're saying is we're concerned about a personnel record. We're concerned about the other type of information that is available. Look, as a New York City correction officer, I'm really, really concerned. Out of our 7,500 inmates, about 2,300 of them are known gang members. Known gang members. And again, we are very, we don't want our information out there. And again, just to go back to I forgot which one, I think it was Senator Mario that I was talking about. The reality is that those officers who violate are few and far and in between. And I don't know, but just speaking as the president of my union, I know that my guys are arrested. I know they are, and I know that their records are made available. So I'm kind of trying to figure out where are we coming from that their records are not made available.
You're saying they're made available to they're made available to the public.
Oh, if they're made available to the court, to the DA, and to the jury, I mean, that's isn't that the public?
So let me ask you a question. So you've got 11,000 members. Less than 1%, to your point, have made mistakes. What is the process? Because I'm not sure I'm clear on this. So let's assume I am an inmate and a correctional officer does something to me that's misconduct. What is the process by which I am able to get that information to get to the point where someone can get arrested, et cetera? How does that all work?
Well, New York City Correction is we have more oversight units, agencies than probably any agency in the freaking city. Besides the fact that we have 12,000 cameras throughout our jails, and there's not an area of the jail where there isn't a camera. If an officer is accused of violating, we have so many different. We have the investigation division; they're looking at it. We have the inspector general; he's looking at it. We have the board of corrections; they're looking at it. We have people over here in the city council; they're looking at it. So the information is there. As far as corrections is concerned, we don't have. We don't have any secrets when it comes to what we do, good or bad, despite what people may come to these microphones and say.
Got it. So just in closing, your basic position is that the correctional officers should not be in this legislation, or do you think that there may be some things within 50A that are not that bad, and so if you want to make that public fine or where are you on in terms of what you care the most about within 50A versus what you don't?
I don't want to misquote Senator Bailey. Can you say what you said a little bit earlier about change?
The few and the.
You said two things about change.
You can either be changed. You can either change with the times or be changed by them.
That's my answer. The reality is that the reality is that if
That's
change
a
is
non-answer.
if change is inevitable.
Yeah.
Then look, I don't want to sound like a broken record. If change is inevitable, then we want to ensure that the change take our safety, our security, and what we do for a living into account,
Right.
and that it's a part of this change.
But
If
that's
you're
why I'm
telling me
asking
that
you the
this is
question
going to happen-
specifically. You're saying what I'm thinking, right? So that's why I think.
I'm not that good.
Well, that's why I'm asking you. Senator Bailey has brought you here, and we're all sitting here, and so the thought is, you know better than me about the safety and security of your members, and so my question to you, in terms of the safety and security of your members, as it relates to 50A, is: are there parts of 50A that are much more impactful than others? And if your argument is no, or you want to give me a speech about something else, then you're not really being helpful, in my opinion, because that is ultimately what we're trying to figure out. What do you care about more with the 58 versus not?
I care that if 50A is going to be appealed
Or changed.
that, again, I'm saying the same thing, that correction officers and what we do for a living is taking into consideration as far as our safety and our security is concerned and what we do.
So-
it may
so
not
then
be,
your- so then your
look,
argument is that
Benjamin, it might
you're
not be
saying
the
let us
answer that
figure-
you're looking
so you're
for,
saying we'll just-
but that's the answer you get.
Well, no, well, okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get confident. No, what I'm saying is, that's fine. What you're ultimately saying is, do whatever you want, but just keep us in mind. That's what you're saying. I'm asking you to say.
No, I'm not saying do whatever
Well,
you want.
you
I'm
said,
saying
but keep us
whatever
in
you
mind.
do, make sure that as lawmakers
I got
that
it.
you're not as more concerned about the other half than you are about this half.
All right.
Be concerned about the whole equally is basically what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Well, I think we're doing that. I think that's why you're here, and why I think I've tried to ask you the same question 3 times, and I get that you don't want to answer it. That's fine. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Benjamin. To close, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. As you mentioned, and as we know, city corrections officers, their disciplinary cases are already publicly available. We haven't seen evidence that of any correlation between the availability of those records and increased risk or violence against corrections officers. A direct correlation between the availability of those cases and risk for corrections officers. Why should police officers who currently their records are shielded by 50A, why should they be privileged over your members, since 50A is currently used to keep their records
I don't
secret?
think anybody should be privileged over my members.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me thank you for your testimony. With that, we'll move to the next panel.
Thank you.
I think